The call of the old soul. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own family? Not because you live differently, but because it seems like the things that others find normal bother you. Conversations about work, money, or current events never interest you. You always feel like you are standing on the sidelines, observing things instead of actually being a part of them. You walk into a room and know you don't belong there. Not because of other people's prejudice, but because your soul tells you so. That's not loneliness, that's awakening. It's not that you're lost, it's that you're remembering something deep inside you, a memory that doesn't belong to this life. There was a 10-year-old boy in India who had never left his small village. Yet he could describe in detail the streets of a city hundreds of miles away, a place his family claimed he had never set foot in. When a research team came to check everything he said was incredibly accurate, the name of the street, the color of the house, the layout of the small shops in the neighborhood, it wasn't imagination. It was part of a phenomenon called past life memory. But in a modern approach, it's a kind of tacit intelligence that comes not from education, but from the depths of consciousness. Not everyone believes in reincarnation, and you don't have to believe in any religion to understand this phenomenon, because what matters is not belief, but experience. People who are called old souls are not older in age, but rather have the ability to perceive the world in a deeper way. They ask questions from a young age. Why do we live? Where do we come from? Is there anything behind the silence? While most children are busy playing, some children quietly look into the eyes of others and seem to understand something that no one says. It is not a biological difference, but a layer of perception that transcends time. An experienced soul will carry within them a very special kind of feeling. It cannot be explained by reason, but can be clearly felt by the heart. You can enter a strange space and feel strangely familiar. You can look into someone's eyes and feel like you love them at some point that you can't remember. You can listen to a strange song and shed tears as if you heard it in a distant life. These experiences do not necessarily prove anything supernatural. They simply say that there are layers of emotions, memories, and perceptions within you that the mind has not yet named. Don't be so quick to call it spiritual and in the mystical sense. Call it the maturity of the soul. It's like when a pianist plays the piano with all his heart without looking at the music sheet, not because he is divine, but because he has practiced for thousands of hours beforehand. An old soul is the same. He has practiced his existence through many forms, many experiences, and many lessons that you no longer remember but always carry with him, like a familiar rhythm in the way he lives, thinks, loves, and forgives. And that explains why there are people who refuse to live according to social norms, not because they are rebellious, but because they feel that material values, fame, or popularity no longer hold any appeal. They don't want to climb to the top to be recognized. They just want to find authenticity. They are willing to slow down, step back, observe, and sort out what really matters. Because they have tried it all and been the winner, the loser, the hero, and the abandoned. They don't need another role. They just want to be real. If you've ever felt lost, inadequate, or overly sensitive to the pain of the world, maybe that's not a weakness. It's a sign of an old soul waiting for you to come back and listen. It's a silent call from yourself, someone who has come a long way in this human journey. Signs of an old soul. There is a strange thing that no one teaches you to recognize the feeling of being older than your age, not on the outside, but on the inside. When people of your age are still passionately exploring the outside world, you have long been interested in the questions inside. When others are attracted by the latest trends, you find peace in old quiet things, like a thick book heavy with the smell of time, or an ancient piece of music playing in the middle of the night. That is not backwardness. That is the echo of the soul's memory, a call from things beyond the experience of a human life. A child can show signs of an old soul from the earliest years of life, not because they are smart, but because they have an emotional depth that adults sometimes cannot understand. They are silent for a long time, but their eyes are full of questions. They are not interested in shallow humor, but in questions that puzzle adults. Why do people die? Do souls see each other? Why do I feel sad without knowing why? Questions that come not from education, but from remembering. Not everyone can reach that state, but if you have, it is the first sign that you have lived longer than you remember. Old souls often have a rich and complex inner life. They perceive many layers of meaning in a situation. They can hear a normal sentence and ponder for hours the hidden motive. They can see the pain in a forced smile. They can read the emotions in the eyes of strangers in a crowd. and sometimes that empathy exhausts them. Not because someone has hurt them, but because they have absorbed too much emotion without words. An old soul lives like a mirror. Everyone who comes close sees themselves, and in the process, the person wearing the mirror is also worn out. They do not like noise, not because they do not like communication, but because superficial conversations tire them. They cannot pretend to be interested when they feel empty inside. They cannot laugh when their hearts need silence. They withdraw from the crowd not to escape, but to recover the energy that is drained by the world, that is not in tune with their frequency, and that is why they love silence. Not to isolate, but to reconnect with themselves. There was a man named Miguel in Spain who spent his whole life in the medical field. When he was young, people always called him old before his time because he often sat in the corner of the classroom listening, instead of talking, writing poetry, instead of playing sports. When he grew up, he did not choose the path of dry science, but became a psychiatrist, specializing in treating depressed patients. He was not good at new techniques, but if he just sat down, listened with his eyes, and kept quiet, the patient would cry. A colleague asked him, "Where did you learn that?" He just smiled and said, "No, I just remember." No one understood what he said. But if you are an old soul, you will understand. The most obvious characteristic of an experienced soul is the rejection of superficial things. They do not want to do work just to survive. They want to do something meaningful. They do not care much about owning expensive things. They want things that make their hearts feel full. They do not seek fame. They want to leave a legacy. They do not live to prove anything. They live to understand themselves and spread something true to the world. And because of that, they are often misunderstood, called eccentric, unapproachable, not trying hard. This society praises the loud, celebrates the winners, and easily ignores those who choose to live, slowly think deeply, and love in silence. But that has never stopped old souls from continuing to live their own way. Because they know just because a seed doesn't bloom at the same time as the field doesn't mean it can't bloom. They believe that each person has their own journey, and that not fitting in with the crowd is sometimes necessary to protect your deepest values. So if you've ever felt tired without knowing why, been moved by a simple scene, been heartbroken by the sadness of a stranger, or found yourself unable to adapt to the pace of modern life, don't be too quick to blame yourself. Maybe you're not wrong. Maybe you're just a soul who has gone through many lifetimes trying to reintegrate into this world. A world you once knew so well but now has changed so much. Ancient wisdom in the soul. It is no coincidence that there are people who, although they have never read any philosophical books, can still say things that make others pause and ponder. It is also no coincidence that some people, although they did not grow up in a religious family, seek meditation as if it were an instinct that had long been dormant in them. Wisdom in its purest form does not come from memorization. It comes from recognition. And an old soul, that is one who carries within him the memory of the soul which is not taught but awakened. If you have ever felt a strange peace when reading an ancient text or heard the teachings of Eastern masters as if they were speaking directly to you, then you are probably not learning it. You are remembering what you once knew. A soul who has lived many lives does not need much explanation from others. They touch truth intuitively. They hear a simple sentence and immediately understand its depth. They look at suffering and do not react quickly because they have seen it many times in many forms in many lives, and they have learned not to judge what is happening on the surface. Many old souls feel like they are living against the flow of society. While the world is running after optimization, efficiency, achievement, social media fame, they find true life in seemingly insignificant things. A cup of hot tea, the afternoon light through the window, a compassionate word spoken for no reason. No one taught them to live this way. They choose to do so because something inside them is always drawn to truth, simplicity, and fulfillment that does not come from the outside. There was a man in Kyoto, a former high-tech engineer, who quit his job and became a moss gardener at an ancient temple. When asked why he gave it all up, he simply replied, "I didn't give up anything. I just came back." In the eyes of others, he was starting his life over, but for him, it wasn't a beginning. It was the next step in a journey that had never been interrupted. That feeling that you're continuing something bigger than this lifetime is one of the defining characteristics of an old soul, and there's something else they don't run after proving themselves. Not because they lack ambition, but because they understand that everything will eventually fade away. Fame, fortune, recognition. The things that society judges as success don't make them feel like they're enough. They don't take it personally, but they know that if you don't know who you are, it's easy to trade everything that's truly precious for an illusion. An old soul has been through those trade-offs. They've been the ones chasing victory, the ones obsessed with power, the ones who stood at the top and felt empty. And from that experience, they choose truth, even if they have to walk alone. The most obvious mark of soul wisdom is not knowledge, but presence. When you're around someone like that, you feel safe, calm, as if you don't need to talk much to understand each other. They don't have to try to be profound. Their very presence is an invitation to you to come back to yourself, because they were you. In some other life on a similar journey, they don't just know, they understand. And it is that understanding that creates the kind of wisdom that cannot be learned from books. The wisdom that comes from living, from hurting, from silence, from compassion, and from the lessons that only the soul remembers. It is hard to explain why some people can meditate for hours in silence for the first time, or read the energy in a room where no one is speaking, or write things that are far beyond their years and experience. But if you have been one of those people, if you have ever felt ancient words in your blood, if you have ever seen a strange symbol and your heart fluttered as if you had met an old friend, you are not in a trance. It is your soul returning to its deepest connection with its ancient wisdom. An old soul does not need to name what it is seeking. It simply keeps going with steadiness, compassion, and the sense that no matter how lonely the path, it is a real journey. And when they meet another person of the same frequency, a look, a word, a presence, they will recognize it immediately, because soul intelligence does not need time to understand, it only needs awakening. Soul scars and call for healing. Not all pain can be explained by what you have experienced in this life. There are sorrows that come from places you cannot name. There are fears that cannot be traced back to a specific memory. There are recurring dreams that make you wake up with the feeling that you have lived another life, where you loved deeply, lost intensely, and carried that pain across the threshold of time. That is what many people call past life memories. But when you look at it through a humanistic lens, it is a scar of the soul, not to scare you, but to invite you to heal. There was a man named Elijah who shared that he always carried an irrational fear when approaching deep water, even though he had never had a drowning accident in his life. He also had recurring dreams where he was floundering in cold, dark water and no one came to save him. When he went to therapy, all the tests showed that he was normal, but the fear was still there, like a memory that refused to be silenced. Until one day during a deep therapy session with a specialist, Elijah suddenly burst into tears when he saw himself as a sailor who drowned in an 18th century maritime accident, although no one could fully confirm it. After facing and naming the fear, the obsession disappeared. Elijah didn't just remember what happened, he faced and accepted that he had survived that fear. Again, and so not everything you feel is rooted in the present. Depression without a cause, feelings of loss, even though your life is not lacking, deep sadness at night when everything is going well during the day, all of these are ancient emotional frequencies, like a thin mist that lingers in the deepest layers of consciousness. The soul does not just accumulate experience, it also accumulates what has not been healed. And that is why in this lifetime you are given the opportunity, not to endure but to release. Some souls carry not only wounds but also the energy of completion. They often feel that this lifetime is their last, not in the sense of physical death, but as the last time they will ever have to go back to the old lessons. They have a quiet urgency, a desire to forgive, to understand, to live authentically to the end. They begin their healing journey not because they are hurt in the present, but because they do not want to carry this pain into the next lifetime. Surprisingly, you do not need to know who you were in your past lives to heal yourself. All you need to do is listen to your body, your emotions, and your reactions as a map. Every time you avoid a certain type of person, every time you get angry for no reason at a seemingly harmless behavior, or every time you repeat a vicious cycle in love, it could be an old wound that is being illuminated to be healed. And only when you have the courage to stay in that feeling without running away can you begin to decipher what the soul has been carrying along the journey. There is no soul that has not been hurt. There is no one so great that he has never made a mistake. But what makes a soul wise is that they choose to heal instead of blame, to understand instead of judge, to look straight into the darkness within without fear. And it is there that they find light, not from the outside, but from within, the pain they have been brave enough to face. An old soul is not someone who is without wounds. He is someone who carries his wounds like a skilled craftsman, carries his tools, not to show off, but to fix what is broken. They don't ask, why am I suffering this? They ask, what can I learn from this? They don't run from their fear. They sit with it, listen to it, and hold it until it calms down, like a baby stops crying. And then something magical happens. They begin to heal, not only themselves, but those they touch. In the modern world, we are often encouraged to run from pain rather than through it. We get busy, consume content, shop, smile on social media. But the more we run from our true feelings, the heavier our souls become. An old soul doesn't do that. They choose to slow down. They choose to ask questions. They don't run from the darkness because they know that true light doesn't come from denying the pain, but from understanding and moving through it. Teachings from the wise. Since ancient times, those who truly understand the nature of life have never been noisy. They do not appear as bright lights, but as smoldering coal stoves, warming the souls of those who are cold. They do not stand on high platforms to teach, but sit on the ground looking straight into the truth. They are everywhere, in the form of philosophers, poets, hermits, beggars, doctors, monks, or just an old man sitting on the porch in the sunset. They do not speak much, but each word carries the weight of a life that has been understood. Those people, the wise, are the sign that wisdom does not come from books, but from souls that have lived many lives. Have you ever read Rumi's lines and felt your heart soften? Have you ever heard Socrates ask a simple question that turned the world of philosophy around? Have you ever heard the words of the Buddha and suddenly understood something that had eluded your reason for years? These wise men were not born to be famous. They were born to pass on ancient codes of the soul that most of us have forgotten in the pace of modern life. They are souls that are not just old, but also awakened. Carl Jung, the great psychoanalyst, once said, "Behind the ego is an ancient soul containing the entire history of mankind." For him, each person is not just a product of his family, society, or personal past, but also the crystallization of countless layers of timeless awareness. And that is why when a person embarks on a journey of inner discovery, he does not go into darkness. He returns to a place of inner light where he once knew the way, but had forgotten it because of the noise of life. Not only in the West, but also in the East. Enlightened people say the same thing. Ramana Maharshi, a great Indian master, once asserted, "You are not this body, not these thoughts, not these emotions. You are pure consciousness, unborn, undying." Those words, when read for the first time, may sound like a theory, but if you are an experienced soul, you will realize that it is not only the truth, but the return of something you once knew but had forgotten. Such people do not argue. They do not try to convince because they know that truth cannot be communicated by logic. It can only be realized by deep silence within. When you are near them, you do not feel that they are teaching you. But after you leave, you suddenly feel lighter, your mind clearer, and your heart more at peace. That is the sign of a soul who has not only learned, but has become the very thing they talk about. In an interview, when asked how to distinguish a true teacher, a Japanese Zen master simply smiled and said, "If after meeting them you feel closer to yourself, then that is the teacher." And it is true. A true old soul does not lead you to where they are. They lead you back to yourself. They do not make you believe anything. They simply remind you of what you have always known but never had time to touch. They are the silent mirror of the soul's memory. There is an old story that tells of a disciple asking his teacher, "How do I know if I have progressed on the path of learning?" The teacher did not answer right away. He led the disciple through the forest, over the stream, over the mountain. At the top of a hill, he sat down, pointed to the ground, and asked, "What do you see?" The disciple looked around and said, "There are only trees, rocks, earth, and wind." The master smiled. "When you no longer seek progress but only see life, then you have grown up." That is the sign of a mature soul, no longer seeking superiority, but simply wanting to live in harmony with the truth moment by moment. Such people do not come to change the world by force. They come to awaken your ancient memory. They do not argue about right and wrong because they understand that all argument only takes you away from true listening. They do not speak of love as a slogan, but express love as air, as presence, as a gentle gaze in the midst of all the violence. And in a world so cluttered with noise and pressure, to prove their presence is a rare reminder that you don't have to do anything to be worthy. You just have to remember who you are. If you've ever been moved by an old book, an ancient teaching, or a look from someone that made you feel like you were standing in front of a part of your soul you'd never named, then you may not just be searching for meaning. You may be starting to remember what you once knew, what the wise have kept for you through generations, through lives. Energy and emotional signs. There is a language that doesn't need words, a vibration that doesn't need images, a layer of connection that can't be explained by logic. It's the language of energy, the language that old souls use to sense the world. They don't need you to tell them what you're experiencing. They only need to be in your presence for a few minutes to feel the atmosphere you carry. They don't know why. They're not proud of it. They just feel like it's something they've been used to for a long time, like it's a skill they've honed over many lifetimes. If you're someone who walks into a space and immediately senses that it's okay or unokay, not because of the decor or the scent, but because of something invisible, you may be sensing energy at a level that others have never noticed. If you've ever felt sad for no reason after talking to someone, or needed quiet time after being in a crowd, you're not weak. You're probably living on a deeper level of vibration where the mind doesn't understand. But the heart knows. Old souls are often described as having thick energy, not in the physical sense, but in the sense of presence. You're around them, and it's as if time slows down. You say things you didn't know you were thinking. You feel seen without anyone commenting. Not because they're doing anything special, but because they're there completely without trying, without judging, without expecting. It's a rare silence, and it's that silence that allows you to hear yourself. A familiar example: have you ever noticed animals or children drawn to someone for no apparent reason? They're not drawn to their looks, their titles, or their words. They're drawn to their energy. Old souls often have a gentle aura, a sense of security that surrounds them, attracting the purest beings. Children smile at them for no reason. Cats and dogs lie next to them without warning. Strangers tell them deep things they never told anyone else. They become space keepers for the most fragile things in others because they have learned not to break anything, even in silence. And because they feel so much, old souls often get tired without doing much. They don't just listen, they absorb. They don't just understand, they empathize at a deeper level than words. A friend once said, "I'm not tired from work. I'm tired from feelings that aren't mine and that I can't ignore." It's a kind of tiredness that no one else sees, but it affects how they live, how they love, how they choose relationships, and how they heal themselves. Old souls are very susceptible to the energy environment. A noisy, fake, overly flashy place can make them feel suffocated even though they are physically fine. They choose to withdraw from spaces that make them lose touch with their true selves, not because they are shy or bored, but because they know that inner silence is the only source of energy that helps them survive in this chaotic world. And when the world calls them weird, they do not get angry. They just smile because they know that others have not gone through the levels of consciousness that they have gone through long ago. There is a woman named Anna, a freelance artist living in Scotland. She is often invited to participate in major art exhibitions, but always refuses. When asked why, she simply replies, "I paint to hear myself again. All that noise makes me unable to hear anymore." She lives simply, without social media, without promotion, but her works are sought after because people say they have a strange energy, as if anyone who looks at them is reminded of something they have long forgotten. That is what often happens when the soul touches matter. It creates not just a product, but a vibration. Another characteristic that old souls share is the feeling of having been here before, even when they are in a strange place. They walk down an old road, look up at an old stone wall, and tears well up in their eyes without knowing why. No one can explain, and no one needs to explain. There are places that do not belong to the map, but to the memory of energy. There are times that cannot be named, but live forever in the emotional body. And when a soul has gone through many lives, they carry this map with them. They do not need to open it, but always know the way back. Energy is the most primitive language. It needs no words, no definition. It just needs you to be quiet enough to feel. And that is what the old soul has learned over many lifetimes. Feeling is the way to understand what the mind can never reach. Past life memories return. Not everything you dream is a product of your imagination. There are dreams that are unlike any other. Vivid, detailed, emotional, and when you wake up, you still carry that feeling with you, like a haunting aftertaste that time cannot erase. Those are not dreams, those are soul memories, things that do not appear on demand, but arise when you are ready to receive them. And there are times when your current life cannot explain what you are feeling, past life memories will appear. Not to confuse you, but to help you complete the missing piece in your journey to self-identity. A 4-year-old boy in Turkey who had never been outside the small town where he was born told me about another city, the street name, the job he had, and how he had died in an accident. When the adults took him to that city, what he said matched the profile of a man who had died 15 years earlier. People called it a special case, coincidence, or even luck. But the point here is not whether the story is true or not, but that there are memories that do not belong to the brain, they belong to the soul. And when those memories come, you don't reason them out, you just know. You know, as if you had returned to the place you lived, loved, and left not with your body, but with the deepest part of you. That's why some people know without studying. A teenager can sit down at a piano and play as if she had practiced for years. A young girl can draw symbols from a civilization she has never heard of. An adult can suddenly write poetry in a lost ancient language. They are not geniuses. They may have lived in those roles. And when the circumstances are right, silence, vulnerability, or an inner crisis, these old skills are reactivated like fire in the wind. The soul never forgets the things it has loved deeply or hurt too much. They lie dormant, waiting for an opportunity to be recalled. A woman named Clara once said she was obsessed with the Italian Renaissance. The clothes, the paintings, even an inner voice that seemed to call to her in Old Italian. She had never been to Italy, but when she arrived in Florence, she burst into tears in the Piazza della Santa Croce. Not because she was moved by the beauty, but because she knew every stone there. She recounted that the feeling was not curiosity, but rather like returning home after a journey so long that you no longer remember the reason for leaving. That is the nature of past life memories. Not coming to tell stories, but coming to awaken. Relationships in this life are also a form of reminiscence. You meet someone for the first time and feel like you have known them before. You fall deeply in love with someone without being able to explain why you feel a strong urge with a look, a smile, a presence that you cannot disconnect no matter how hard you try. Those connections often defy logic because they did not begin in this life, but are a continuation of an unfinished story from before. The soul is not limited by time. What is not healed, not completed, not forgiven, it will come back in a new form, a new name, but with the same old vibration. And if you have ever felt pain in love without any reason, you may be replaying a wound from an unresolved relationship. Some people do not need hypnosis, do not need therapy. The memories still appear, like a call in the night, like a strange wind carrying the scent of a long time ago. When the mind is quiet, the soul speaks. When the pain is too great to explain, the soul offers an explanation from the past. When a lesson repeats itself in your life, as if you always return to the same bend, the same wound, the same mistake, it is not a failed attempt. It is a lesson not learned. The soul does not forget. It is patient. And if you still find yourself repeating, it is because the lesson is still waiting for you, not to punish, but to free. Past life memories do not come to disturb. They come to clarify why you are you, why you love things that others do not understand, why you carry a nameless sadness, why do you fear waterfire commitment, abandonment, even though you have never been in this life? Why do you write as if you have lived in other centuries? Why do you yearn for something sacred that no one around you can name? All these questions do not come to be answered by reason. They are the doors through which your soul leads you back. Intuition, the voice of the soul. There are answers you have searched for everywhere. In books, in the advice of others, in long conversations with loved ones, or even in those restless moments of the night. But then in the midst of all that noise, you suddenly feel something very small, but clear appear in your heart, not in words, but in feelings. A kind of understanding that does not come from reasoning, does not come from someone else, but comes from deep within yourself. It is not a vague hunch. It is intuition, the voice of the soul that has gone through many lives and is still silently guiding you. If reason is a map, intuition is a compass. You can go in circles, get lost, stop in fear, but that inner compass always points in one direction. And the strange thing is, old souls often have a special kind of acumen. They know without knowing why they know. They make choices that don't make sense by conventional standards, but turn out to be the right path. They turn down tempting opportunities, because they don't feel right, and time proves that they are necessary. They walk away from relationships that everyone else thinks are ideal because of a dream, a look, a hunch that something is wrong, and they don't need a reason. They just need enough silence to hear themselves. Intuition doesn't shout, it whispers, it doesn't argue with logic, it just quietly gives a feeling that this is right or it isn't. That's why so many people miss it. Because they live in a world where noise is worshipped and listening is a luxury. But if you're an old soul, you know very well, the quieter you are, the clearer you become. The more you turn inward, the more you see the path. Not the path of your feet, but the path of your soul, the one that only you can walk. You don't need anyone to affirm that you are an old soul. You just need to recognize your own unique feelings. The peace when you enter a meditation space, even if you have never studied it, the strong empathy for the pain of others, even if you have never experienced the same, the wordless connection to symbols, cultures, ancient lessons that you cannot explain through this life's experience. It is not a coincidence. It is the voice of your soul asking you to remember who you are in an increasingly fragmented world. Intuition is the red thread that connects you to the whole. It helps you feel what is real, when everything else is an illusion. It guides you to the people, places, and moments necessary for you to learn the lessons you have carried with you from past lives. It helps you avoid repeated wounds, and more importantly, it helps you live a life that has depth, direction, and meaning, even if no one else knows it. And if you've ever sat alone, looked up at the sky and asked yourself, who am I? How many times have I lived? Why do I feel like I've been through this before? You're not imagining things. You're knocking on the door of a memory that doesn't belong to your brain, but to your roots, your soul. And the answer isn't in any teacher, religion, or formula. It's in the silence you dare to face. It's in the look in your eyes when you're truly honest with yourself. It's in the intuition that's been patiently waiting for you to listen. You don't need a ritual, a certificate, or someone to validate your soul. Whatever you are feeling, if it comes from silence, from love, from a true depth within, then it is real. Soul maturity is not something to be proud of, but a gentle responsibility to be kinder, more compassionate, more patient, and to continue to heal. Not only for yourself, but for those you touch with your eyes, your words, and your heart. You are not alone. There are souls like you, slowly awakening, learning to turn inward, learning to listen to their own silent voice. The journey is not short, it is not easy, but it is real, and it is worth it. If you feel something in your heart being awakened by this video, please share it with someone you know who needs to hear these words. You may be the silent light that helps someone find their way again. And if you want to continue on this journey of deeper soul memories, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment sharing what touched you the most. Not to spread information, but to spread the deep connection between awakening souls. See you again at the next gateway. Thank you.